Good morning. Welcome to Creating Technology Enhanced Items in Schoolnet. This is Pam Batchelor with the Department of Public Instruction on the Digital Teaching and Learning team. I'm excited to be with you this morning and take a look at Schoolnet and some item types that use technology to really kind of go beyond your basic multiple choice questions. With me today, I have my colleague Molly Holloman. Molly, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, my name is Molly. I am the educator on loan for the Division of Digital Teaching and Learning. I live out in Dare County and I still work with the librarians and the tech facilitators out there. So I'm the Eastern Region EOL.
Yes, and we're so excited to have Molly with us today to help with questions and in the chat as well. So thank you, Molly, for joining us. We will be going over just a couple of logistics questions. First of all, you will see a copy of the slide deck for today in the handout section. You will definitely want the slide deck open. So if you want to take a second to either locate the handout section or you can go into the chat message and you'll see a link to our presentation that you can click on, or you can enter the URL that is on the screen right now into your browser bar. You will not be able to click on my screen because it's kind of works kind of like a TV. You're just viewing my screen. So you'll definitely want a copy of that presentation up on your own. Also, we are going to go ahead and make sure that everyone can hear us and see us. So I have a couple of questions. First of all, we'll make sure our audio is working. When the poll questions appear in GoToWebinar, if you find yourself that you can't click on them to respond, sometimes you have to minimize your screen in GoToWebinar in order to respond to poll questions. So we're going to give about 10 more seconds to make sure everyone can hear. Looks like over half of us have responded so far and everyone can hear so far. Yay! Always a fun thing to have to troubleshoot audio issues on a webinar. So I'm glad so far it's looking like everyone can hear us. And then we're just gonna ask if everyone can see my screen. So that's the second question. If you'll just respond to this within the next few seconds here, we'll have all of our logistics out of the way. All right, it does look like everyone can see my screen, so that's wonderful. We're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about, there is a slide here on slide 2 for GoToWebinar troubleshooting issues. If you happen to have any issues during the webinar, you can refer back to slide 2. A lot of times the magic solution is just to leave the webinar and rejoin. That kind of solves most audio issues as they occur. And then today we're going to be talking about those technology enhanced items in Schoolnet. So these are not really items that you're going to find in the item bank. They're going to be more items that you are going to create yourself, but they are really worth the investment of time. And so we're going to start with, I'm actually going to show you some of these items. I built a little sample test, and then we're going to show how to work with each item type. So we're going to talk about working with images. We're going to talk about drag and drop items, hotspot items, gap match items. I'm also going to show you how to embed videos into your questions. And then for the particular question that I also have a rubric tied to the open response so that way I can quickly grade it and give standards-based feedback in an efficient manner. And then we'll go through and of course we're going to pause along the way for questions as they come up. So please feel free to enter your questions in the handouts in the questions bar in GoToWebinar. All right, so one last logistical note, GoToWebinar is tracking your attendance for today. There is no sign-in that you need to do. Within 5 business days after this webinar, you'll receive an email from me, Pamela Batchelor, at dpi.nc.gov with your certificate of participation for today's webinar. It's worth 0.1 CEU, which is equal to 1 hour of credit. We do recommend it's for digital learning competency credit. You will need to follow your local process to submit and get approval for that credit type. You will also get a copy of the slide deck and a link to the recording. Today's session is being recorded, so that's wonderful. So you can go back and review, because I know what I'm talking about now. Being at the end of the year, you may not use this immediately. You may, go back and, a few months later over the summer, be like, oh, what was that Pam said about making those gap match questions? And you'll have this recording that you can come back to. I've also got a lot of help guides linked into the slide deck, so you'll definitely want to keep up with the slide deck as well. All right, so let's put on our thinking caps and see if we can survive a 6th grade social studies test together. I'm going to demonstrate on my screen. There's just a few too many people for everyone to log in themselves and take the test. I'm sorry, I wish that was possible. So you're going to view the test through my screen, and I'm going to go through it. And just as we look at the items, just be thinking about how you could apply this to your area. I chose 6th grade social studies because I used to teach middle school social studies, so that content was familiar to me. But you can definitely use these items for any grade level, any subject area. So as you look at this test that I'm going to take, be thinking about that, and then we'll come back together and share that after we go through the test. All right. So I'm going to be logging into our training site. And this kind of is nice because it gives you a view of what a student sees in Schoolnet if you've never taken a chance to look at when your students are logged into Schoolnet. So students can log into Schoolnet wherever they have internet access, so they can do it from home. In the take a test box, they just enter that test code. So here is the test code, and I'm going to click start my test. And start the test now. All right, and so our first item on this test is a Gap hotspot question. And it is a hotspot where I select the top 3 most populated countries in Asia using the information from the chart below. So I have a chart, and then I have my actual map of my hotspots. And my hotspots are the circles that are indicated on the map. So looking at this chart, I need to select the top 3. So when I select on Schoolnet, it kind of illuminates the hotspot that I've selected. And now if I want to select a different one, I can unselect and then reselect, right? And so notice now I've got these 3 selected, and then I can go on to my next question. This is a drag and drop item type. So you can use these for categorizing, right? So looking at human and physical characteristics of a place. So physical, just drag and drop these into their containers. Hopefully I'm getting this right since I used to teach it. All right, next we have another hotspot question, but this one is done with a passage. This is actually a primary source document. It's the Mayflower Compact. So I'm going to be looking at the purpose. So you can have students read historical documents and then determine their purpose and select the purpose using the hotspot. So let's see. All right, I'm going to go with that one. And then this next one, this is Gap Match item type. And we're going to be using Gap Match to create a timeline of ancient Rome by putting the events in chronological order. So that's one of the 6th grade social studies standards, is that students create and timelines, charts, and graphs that, okay, so we're going to do first one, we got to build the city. Then it becomes a republic. Caesar, let's see, first Roman emperor, Romans invaded Britain, end of the Roman rule in Britain, start of the decline, and end of the Western Empire. All right, I think I got those right. And then finally, here's that last question type where I have a video embedded. And then we're going to watch the video and then respond to one paragraph about Hammurabi's code. So I'm going to go ahead and Hammurabi's code was a set of laws based on justice. All right, I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to do my paragraph like I should be. Notice I did enable spell check, so I could actually spell check. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and submit my test. And while that's submitting, it does show me my score, but notice that one question hasn't been graded yet. So just FYI, make sure you tell your students that if they have those open response questions that Schoolnet can't grade on it, that their score is not final. It's only based on the part that Schoolnet can grade automatically. All right, I'm going to close this window and I'm going to log out of the student view. And I would love for you to answer in the question window which of those question types you think you could use. So were any of those question types something that you could use in the future with your students? Or any takeaways you had from that? All right, let's see what we got in the questions. So Jessica mentioned that she could use the gap match. Serena's asking, is the video embedded in Schoolnet or will clicking on the video take them outside of Schoolnet? So the video is embedded within Schoolnet. So when you add that embed code, it's within that test window. I do think that there's a way at like the end of the video, I think YouTube videos has where you can click on it and it opens up a new tab in YouTube. So I haven't checked that to see if that's disabled or not, but they might be at the end of the video, be able to go out to YouTube. Drag and drop, lots of votes for drag and drop. Embedded video, people could say that they could use all of them. Hotspots work great in 4th grade. And I'm going to show you how you can upload videos into the Schoolnet. Lenny was asking how long can an embedded video be? So best practice would be to keep it under 10 minutes, but you would just need to make sure that the students keep the page active because sometimes Schoolnet will time out if a student just has a test window open for a long time, like if they're watching a video for a long time. But I haven't actually seen like a technical limit. Just do your best judgment there. And yeah, you can use any type of questions after a video. So a video, you could have multiple choice questions, you could have passages, any type of questions works with the videos. All right, so thank you. Looks like a lot of people are interested. Yay. Yep, gap match for ordering and math. Wonderful. All right, so we're going to jump into, okay, we've seen what it can do. How do we do it, right? So the first thing is that you notice a lot of those questions had images. Just some notes I wanted to share before we get into particular item types about how working with images is kind of particular in Schoolnet. So first of all, you're always going to want to make sure your images are JPEG format, which JPEG is like the standard format, but sometimes there's also like PNG and a few other types of photo formats. You're just going to always make sure you use JPEG formats. And then Schoolnet has some specific sizes images have to be. So if you're using like those hotspot items, like were maps or charts that I had, you have to make sure it's no bigger than 600 by 600 pixels. If you are wanting the images to be answer choices, which I'll demonstrate, so like for those categorization questions, right, for drag and drop, you can actually put images in there, which is great for our younger students, where you can have them sort and organize images. But they have to be that 130 by 130. And I've linked on here an image resize tool. This is just a free online tool where you can take any image that you've saved to your computer. And let's see, I'll look at this one right here, this picture of an apple. And notice that it is bigger than 130 by 130. So I need to, if I wanted to use this as like a sorting choice, I just go in here and make sure there's no numbers bigger than 130 by 130. And I can also change the format of it here. So if, for example, this particular image was a different format than that JPEG, I can click on JPEG and then resize image and download image. So the only thing I don't like about this website is it's free, but it has ads. So just make sure you ignore the ads and just click on the buttons. You can also resize images in Paint and a few other, I'm sure there's lots of other programs. I just like this because it's online and it's free. You just got to make sure that you ignore the ads on it. All right, so we're gonna start looking with drag and drop. So we're going to actually make a drag and drop. So this is another example of drag and drop that's a little bit more advanced than the option I showed, where we've got changes to matter and students have to drag and drop whether they're a chemical change or a physical change. But again, it also accepts images. So to make one of these items, I'm going to log in to that training site again, so that way I'm not showing any real data. HBD leader 2. And once we are signed in to the training site over here under assessments, where we go down to items, rubrics, and passages, I'm just going to go down here and create. And so when you create items like this, it actually stores them in your own personal bank. And those personal bank never gets deleted. So I can take items that I've created and use them on multiple tests as long as I'm teaching. So I'm going to go under that create, and I'm going to go under and click drag and drop.
Hey Pam, we have a
Yes.
request to maybe slow down when you're clicking, so just to make sure people are
Yeah,
able to
I'll
see.
definitely, trying to slow down and make sure that we're going slow now that we're into the actual creating. All right, so first thing in Schoolnet is you do have to select a subject area, grade level, and standard. That's just something that's required for every single, question, which is great because that means all of our data is aligned to standards, right? So for this example, I'm going to do a question with beginning, middle, and end, and I'm going to show the pictures. So we're going to go, and I think beginning, middle, and end. I can't remember if that's first grade or if that's kindergarten. So let's see. Do, 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 do. All right. I think it's first grade. There we go. All right, so I've got a standard. So drag and drop in the question content. We are just, so we're just going to type in any instructions that we want. So sort the pictures into beginning, middle, and end. All right, so beginning, middle, end. All right, and then we go over here to our answer choices. And we use that little picture icon, right? And so here's a picture that I've already resized. Here. And so you can make it, notice underneath the answer choices, you can say how many times a student can drop this in a container. So if you were looking to make this a little bit more difficult, you could make it so that way students could answer by dropping it in multiple containers. You can also remove answer choices or add answer choices so you can have multiples. The um, I believe it supports up to 10, right, that of answer choices that you can sort. And then you can also change how many containers you have for sorting, right? So for this example, in beginning, middle, and end, but you could also just do 2 or 3 categories as well. So I've asked a couple of questions come up about standards. So North Carolina, we do have all of the North Carolina standards loaded in Schoolnet. So everything, including your exceptional extended standards for exceptional children. We have the EL standards for English language. So you should be able to find your relevant set of standards. You should not have any problems with that. If you do, let me know if you notice something is missing. But I promise you, I haven't been able to go through and find anything that's not there when I've gone through and had questions in the past. So you should be able to find your standards when you go in. All right. Now we have to go down here to our answer choices and mark which one's correct, right? So which container should it accept the answer choices there. So the first one is our beginning, right? So we start with our cake mix for this example. And then in the middle, we have the mixing phase, right? And then finally, we kind of end up with our cake. So Michelle is saying there's no standards for some of the middle school courses. Could you tell me what course you teach and I'll see what I can find. Um, so now we've made sure we've got our answer choice. You can actually change how many points it's worth. If you want to, by default, it'll tell you 1. You can do default scoring, which means that they would get a point for each one that they get correct, or you can do it all or none. So if they miss one of them, they don't get any points. All right, so keyboarding and word processing is a course that's under CTE. So I got an example there for standards. So if I go under our CTE, is going to be under our, there's a few different places that it could be. Most of the time, there's business and I think they're mostly under business from middle school. So if I go and select my standards for business, finance, information technology, There's multimedia, computer skills and applications, um, and then we also have career development. I know that's another one that I get asked about frequently. We do have those standards for the career exploration courses that are at the middle school. So hopefully um, that will be helpful. It is required to align to a standard. So if maybe the only thing I can think of that I've seen that you might not have is a locally developed course. And if you do have a locally developed, like a Project Lead the Way course, I think maybe a couple of them don't have it, then you would just need to align it to another related standard. So, for like a Project Lead the Way course, if it's related to technology, then I would go back and look under those CTE courses and see what most closely aligns. But we should have the standards loaded for everything. All right, so I've gone through and I've made my standard alignment there, and I'm going to go ahead and preview to make sure that this question appears correctly and how I want it to be for my students. So I'm going to preview in Test Nav. And all right, so at the beginning we have our cake mix. In the middle, we have our mixing, and at the end, we have our cake, and then we can go calculate the score, and this is what the student would get um, if they sorted into these boxes. Right, so just to always make sure that your scoring is correct and how you anticipate it to be, and then you can just close this tab once you're done previewing. Any question about drag and drop? I'll wait just a second to see. All right, I'm not seeing any questions coming down about drag and drop. So we're gonna go on to our next item type, which is gonna be, we're gonna talk about hotspots next. So on this slide, which is slide 9, I do have a guide linked, which has step-by-step directions for creating hotspots, because they're probably the most complicated question that you could create in Schoolnet as far as when you're creating them. So hotspots have two options. You can either make it where the student selects multiple hotspots or one hotspot, right? So in my sample test I gave, there was a question where I had to select 3 hotspots for the countries in Asia that had the highest population. And then there was a second hotspots question with the primary source document of the Mayflower Compact, where they just had to select one group of lines. So when you're thinking about a hotspot and you have a map or a chart or a diagram that you want to ask students about, be thinking, do you need to have them select multiple places, or do you just need them to have to select one place? All right. So I'm going to go ahead and model, but I did want to point out what that directions looks like, right? So it kind of walks you through step by step how to create a hotspot. But we're going to go back to that item, and I'm just going to go ahead and change the type, right? And so where I go to change type on my item, I could go into a hotspot. So I'm going to do one with multiple. All right. And so now I need to go back in here and let me go in and select a different grade level and subject area. So this one, I'll do another social studies. Maybe we'll go into 2nd grade and All right, so looking at representations. All right, and then so first thing is we put in our question, right? So select um, the southern and western regions of the United States. All right. So we need to upload a Canvas image, which is that background image that students will use to select. This does have to be less than 600 by 600. So I have a map of the United States that's blank, and I'm going to go ahead and um, start with my regions, right, that are going to be hotspots. So when you draw a hotspot, you can add a label to it, but for this particular one, I don't want to add a label to it. But we click on the draw hotspot, and we can either draw a rectangle, a circle, or like a plot line, which is great depending on what type of canvas image you have, whether it's maybe like a diagram of a frog or a plant, and you want them to select different spaces. Um, but I'm just going to draw out um, a couple of choices here. So that'll be A, and then B, and then we'll do C, and D. Right? So for this particular one, I've asked them to select the southern and western regions of the United States. So the southern region was A, and then the western region would be D. And you can again adjust how many points. You can also, down here at the bottom, select how many hotspots students can select. So this, depending on the age appropriateness of your students, this might be helpful because it prevents them from clicking on everything. Because sometimes, especially our younger students, they like to click on everything. So again, you can do default scoring, all or nothing scoring. And we're going to go down here and we're going to preview this item and make sure it looks correct. All right, so my item has loaded. I don't like how this hotspot here kind of looks off to the side. So we can go ahead and adjust that. Notice it said there's a maximum of 2, so that's good. My students won't be able to click on everything. They have to kind of unclick and calculate their score. That looks good. So what I need to do now, oops, something went wrong. All right, sometimes that happens. And what I would have done is I just would have adjusted the hotspot of that one image. So any questions about hotspot items?
I haven't seen any specific to that, Pam.
All right. Thank you, Molly. All right, so we're gonna go and look at gap match. So gap match, that was the item that in my sample test I created a timeline with. But you can also use it for with passages, such as this example that I've got on the screen where a student has a passage and then they're using words to best complete the sentences. You can also make those close passages, which were, if you were a fan of some of our previous early literacy, they had those gap passages, and so you can recreate those with gap match. Fill in the blanks. Lots of things that you can do with gap match items. And so a very good question asked about read aloud. So read aloud will read anything that you put in the in the question box. So any content you type in the question. So um, it will also read the answer choices. And so any of those diagrams for like the hot spots, if I had put a label on it, such as maybe if I labeled the regions, southern region, western region, central region, it would have read those aloud for the student if they have read aloud enabled on the test and in the student's personal test profile. All right. And Elwood asked a very good question. You can share items that you create your personal item bank with your colleagues. It's very easy to do that. I'll show in just a second. I do want to show the instructions for Gap Match. Again, just like Hotspots, you have a step-by-step PDF here that is linked to the presentation for you to go back and follow. But we're going to go ahead and go back to the Schoolnet page under assessments. I'm going to go down under that create. And now I'm going to do a gap match question. Right, so with a gap match, again, we have to choose those same things. We're going to go down and select our subject area. So we'll do math for this one. And we'll do maybe 4th grade. And we'll look under fractions. And maybe look at comparing fractions. Right, we'll do comparing fractions. All right. So I have a gap match. And so if I wanted to, I could add a passage to any of these items, and that could be the passages that are in the Schoolnet, as well as the passages, that you can create your own. If I go in here and say add passage, it's going to ask me, do I want to link to a passage that's already in Schoolnet, or do I want to create a new passage to go with this question? But for this question, I'm going to talk about gap match for comparing fractions, right? So my standard tells me about comparing, I thought I had fractions. I did. Right? So the symbols, greater than, lesser than, right? So maybe I can go in here to my editor, and I'm going to look into my equation editor, and we'll find I think this one was decimals. So we're going to have 0.25 and I'm going to put a gap match, and we'll do 0.50. All right. And then we're going to do 35. 0.25, 0.75, 8. All right. And then our answer choices will just be and then so we have our answer choices as the signs for greater than, less than, or equals. And because I want to make this a little bit harder, we're going to let them drop each one of these into all three, right? So we want them to be able to have their choices of less than, greater than, or equal for all three of those gap match, right? And then we have to go through and similarly, we have to make sure we select an answer for each one. All right, so for the first one, should have the less than. The second one should be greater, oops, gap 2, greater than, and 3 less than. All right, again, you can adjust the scoring, so all or none, or you can give them a point for each one. And then we're gonna preview. And I didn't teach math, so I apologize if this is not exact, but you get how to make the question, right? So I can go down here, and I got 2 out of 3. So you see how that works, where the students can drag, and I made it so you can have all 3 if they wanted to, right? All right. Any questions about gap match?
We don't have any right now about gap match, but there is a question about sharing item banks
Yep.
with multiple districts.
Yep, and we're going there now. So
Cool.
I've created this item, and I'm going to click on right here where it says I can either save it to a personal bank, which is only visible to me, or I can save it to another bank. And so depending on what you have access to, you will have access to, I know a couple of questions about sharing. You will be able to save to a bank at your school, and then an administrator at your school has the permission to actually save that item at the district level. Now, what you can do is you can create a new bank right here, right? And we're going to call this a sample bank. And this is Pam's best items, right? And so right now, I just have this bank saved to me because that's how it's created. But I can go in here and add people. And so let's say you have someone at your another school within your district that you want to work with. You can go in and enter their name, last name, comma, first name, and you can share this with them as long as they're within the state of North Carolina. So you can share a bank with anyone in the state of North Carolina. What you can't do is, if you'll notice, there's an institutions button. I have that because I'm logged in as a district leader. So district leaders can share with a whole school or a whole other district. Whereas as a teacher, I would just have the people button and I would have to share my bank individually with people. Now, what I could do is I could use that people button to share my bank with a district administrator within my district, and then they can go into this bank. And if I give them the manage role, they can actually add other institutions or other schools within my district. Right, so that's kind of how the permissions work. As a teacher, you have permission to share individually with anybody in the state, but on a group level, like for the entire school or an entire district, that is limited to your administrator at your school can share with the entire school, and then your administrator at the district level can share with the entire district. All right, so hopefully that went over sharing. And I'm not going to share this question just because I'm not exactly sure I met the standard with that. I would need further review before sharing with anybody. All right. So we're going to go on and talk a little bit about that video. So in Schoolnet, if you have a video file or an audio file, there is a media button, I'll show you in just a minute, where you can upload that video file or audio file, as long as it's less than 4 megabytes, directly into Schoolnet. So if you make your own videos, or maybe if you're a foreign language teacher and you want to make an audio recording of yourself speaking in a foreign language, you can do that and upload it directly into Schoolnet for students to answer questions about, right? And it can be any type of question. You can put a video in any type of question. So it could be a true false, could be multiple choice, could be gap match, hotspot, you name it, you can put a video in it. Now, if you have a video that you want to show that's on YouTube, I'm going to also show you that, where you can share the icon and copy the embed code for the video on YouTube. And then in each question box, there's a source code icon, and we paste that code in it. Okay, so let's go back to the site. And I'm going to create another item. This time I'm going to do open response. And again, it doesn't have to be open response. It could be anything. So maybe I'm going to go and find a PE video, right? So I'm going to look for 5th grade. And maybe I'm going to look for looking at alcohol abuse. All right. And so I'm going to, in my question content, this is a rich text editor. There's all of these buttons and icons. What we're looking for is this little insert media button. Looks kind of like a play button. And this is where you would insert your media by choosing it from the screen. I don't have a video already uploaded, so I'm not going to do that, but that's how you upload it again. You just go to insert media. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up YouTube. And I do realize that districts, you may have a filter on YouTube, or there may be certain videos that you don't have access to. So alcohol abuse, children, for students, elementary. All right. So alcohol effects on the brain and body. Of course, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to watch this entire video and make sure it's appropriate to the content that I want to address, as well as my standards, as well as the age appropriateness of this video. But for our time purposes, I'm going to go in and click on the share button for YouTube, and I'm going to click on the embed code, and it's going to come up with all this stuff that I'm not quite sure about. But I'm going to click on copy, because this is the code that's going to embed it into Schoolnet. So I'm going to click on copy. All right. And then I'm going to go into my item, and I'm looking for the source code icon, which looks like this little less than, greater than symbol. And I'm going to paste that source code into there. All right. And so now I have my video in my question, and then I can continue to ask list 3 effects of alcohol on the brain and body. All right. And then my students have this online response option. I can make it so they have a rich text formatting ability with a spell check if I want. Or I can also give them an equation editor if this was like a math question and I wanted them to be able to use the equation editor to formulate a response. And then right here where it says points, I can also go in and select a rubric. And once you create a rubric, you can assign it to multiple questions and multiple times. So I have one here that I used for that 6th grade. And I'm just going to attach it here. And now I can go down and preview this question. If you embed a video, it's very important you take the time to preview the question to make sure your video loads correctly. To go back to Serena's question from earlier, Serena, I know you were talking about can students like go to YouTube. So I noticed there was that option on YouTube when I clicked on share and embed about if students can show the player controls. And so I think if I embed it without that, it would make it so students wouldn't be able to go as easily to YouTube if that's a concern for you. Um, so I'm gonna go look at my question. The video works. I have my 3 effects, right? So this looks like it all works. And I want to show you what it looks like when you go to score this item. So I'm going to go in to that test that I took at the beginning of the webinar, and we're going to go briefly show you how to score those open response items. Right. So to go score a test with open response, you have to open up the test details, and then under test options, there's a score test. For you as a teacher, it looks really easy. But for me as a district person, I have to go in here and find students. Yours would have a okay. All right, let me pop over and see what questions. All right. So Denise had a question about, is it possible to create several items throughout the school year and then at the end of the year compile a complete review test? Yes. So what you would be doing is you'd want to make sure that when you create your items, you're saving them to an item bank. And then at the end of the year, you would just add all of those items to one new test. That's your review test. Nicole was asking, how can we prevent students from clicking out of Schoolnet and searching for answers on Google during a test? So if you use the standard TestNav browser to give your test, there's no way to prevent that. Your best thing is just to monitor students and go back and monitor students and make sure that they are not opening another tab. We do have a way for you to give a lockdown browser, and that is the secure browser. However, that requires an install on each device that's being used for testing. So it's like a downloaded application and it's a full screen lockdown browser. So you would have to coordinate with your technology services team to make sure that um, that's loaded on the student's device. So here is the test I took earlier. I made it as a teacher, and that last question is the question about how the Hammurabi's code. That's open response, and I have this rubric. So the rubric makes it really easy for me to give standards-based feedback on this particular question. You can assign a rubric to lots of different question types. So it's not just open response. Um, so I designed this rubric to be based on a 1, 2, or 3. So beginning, progressing, or mastery, right? Uh, so based on the student's response, I would give them a beginning, right, for both of them. I can also enter comments. So next time, fully complete your answer. All right, and then save. And then the student would get their score. They could see the rubric and see the criteria that they were graded on, as well as the comments that I made. And then if there were multiple students that I needed to grade, there would be a little arrow at the top here, and I could quickly go through each student in my class. So it kind of makes it, if you're familiar with Canvas at all and the speed grader, this is kind of the Schoolnet equivalent to it, when you have this side-by-side view where you just have the students' responses and the rubrics. All right, I realize we're running close to the end of the hour. I do want to make sure I show you the resources. So I do have a guide here that talks about rubrics and how to create them. So feel free, make sure you go over that. And if this is something that's interesting to you, rubrics are wonderful for that, quick feedback that's standards aligned. I also have resources. This is our last Schoolnet webinar for the year. I can't believe 2020, the 2019-20 school year is almost over. We will resume our webinars in September. We will have like a back to school series of on-demand webinars that'll be available in August, and then we'll start our live face-to-face or person live webinars back in September. So if you missed any of the Schoolnet webinars, you can actually go back to our Google site. And if you click on Webinar Archive, you can actually see all the way back 2 years worth of webinars. There's lots of content here that's available for you to go back and look at. Are there any last questions? And I'll pause for a second to see if there's any last questions about Schoolnet. All right. Well, I thank you so much for taking time out of your morning to be with us and to explore Schoolnet. I will let you know that within 5 business days, you'll be getting that email from me with your CU certificate, a link to this recording, and a copy of the slide deck. That will go to the email address you registered with. So if you registered for this webinar with your personal email, just keep track of that email. And then please feel free to let me know if you have any questions. And I hope to see you guys back in August or September with our Schoolnet webinars that we have for next year. So, and thank you, Molly, for joining us today and helping out.
Thanks, Pam. I appreciate it. You're getting lots of love in the questions
Yes.
box.
Yes, thank you all, and everyone be safe. Hopefully all of this will be over by the time we start a new school year and start fresh. We'll see. But either way, we will do the best we can to support students. I did want to point out one quick thing. I know we talked a little bit about Secure Tester. We do not recommend using Secure Tester for a test that students are taking at home, just because students home, even if they have a school issued device that has Secure Tester on it, their home internet might have some type of security on it, or we've seen issues with like antivirus software that blocks it from a home network with a firewall. So I do want to say that if you're in a situation where you want your students to complete Schoolnet assessments from home right now, I would not put the secure browser or activate that, just to minimize your amount of tech support that you'll have to provide students, because we have had quite a few issues when Secure Tester has been used, but then we don't have nearly as many issues when it's just a normal standard browser. So just a good point there. All right. Have a wonderful morning. Thank you so much.